Here's a little corner by beach volleyball, 44 times. Isn't it a weird coincidence that the 2020 Olympics, that most of the sports venues are located on islands in Tokyo Bay, the very place that Godzilla, the radioactive lizard monster, emerged from? That is one of the great ironies of modern history in Japan. Greetings from Tokyo. I'm Yoichi Shimazu, former editor with the Japan Times daily newspaper, and since then I've done a lot of radioactivity research in the Fukushima area and here in the Japanese capital. If you're wondering whether to come to the 2020 Tokyo Olympics and have some concerns about radioactivity out of Fukushima, we're going to get the record straight here. Now, the supporters of the Olympics, they tell you it's completely safe, of course, because they're going to profit from these games. But the skeptics like myself who've conducted the scientific research, which you're going to see here, have a completely different story. Warning, basically a warning. There's nothing more scary than radioactive rain. Now, we're going to hear from the leading safety expert put forward by the Olympic Committee on how safe is Tokyo. Super Mario!
Now hold it right there, Nintendo. That's not Super Mario. That's Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the main supporter of the nuclear industry.
20年、東京で大会を開催することは私たちにとって大きな名誉となることでしょう。東京は現在も、そして2020年に至るまでも世界で最も平和な都市の一つであります。何名かの方は福島についてご懸念をお持ちかもしれません。ここで保証いたします。事態は収拾に向かっていることを。そしてこれまでも、そしてこれからも東京。
Welcome to Tokyo Electric Power Company. Is that a radiation detector?
No, it's a lie detector.
So what do sports have to do with the nuclear industry? Well, the official sponsors of the International Olympic Committee includes GE, which built the reactor that blew up at Fukushima, and Atos, which is the main PR agency for the global nuclear industry. That connects Tokyo with Tokyo Bay. Impressive bridge. Yeah, sport to die for. This side up for beach volleyball. Right now it's pretty depressing dump here, but this is going to be a nice sandy beach. And I guess all the port workers are going to enjoy all the girls in the bikinis here. Radioactive exposure has a terrible effect on women's reproductive health, but especially for young girls, because all of the eggs in their ovaries could be harmed for a lifetime. The Tokyo big site. This is where the International Olympic Committee and the sports media will be headquartered during the 2020 Games. Even here, a site that's scrubbed nearly every day, washed down, hosed down with water, still has high levels of radiation around it, and it's been this way for years, and it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. I think the Olympic Committee had better be warned. It's not just their athletes dressed in shorts and t-shirts and bikinis and so on who are going to be affected by the radiation. It's also the officials, the judges, the sponsors, the corporate sponsors, the heads of the national team, and all the politicians and sports officials who come over from 100 countries. They're all going to be exposed here too. Trash in the water. Cross Bay Bridge that leads to Uminomori. Uminomori is one of the world's largest nuclear dump sites, and it's right on the flight path to Haneda Airport, the main airport for the Olympics. Hey, these are 3-ton bags of radioactive waste from Fukushima. Coming right up onto the incinerator plant, which burned just hundreds of thousands of tons of burnable waste from Fukushima. Radioactive ash is being used for the foundation of this hill. Layer by layer, the radioactive ash is being used to build up this hill and is covered with sand and clay. Since these scenes were shot, the incinerator plant has been demolished to cover up the fact that the Olympic Games are going to be held on top of radioactive hills. The winner of the equestrian contest can be worth tens of millions of dollars, but after it's exposed to radioactivity, it can't even be used for dog food. The water channel between the two halves of Uminomori, or Sea Forest Island, will be used for the rowing events. For a rowing team, this is like being a slice of bread in the middle of a toaster. In their winning bid for Tokyo to be the host city of the 2020 Games,
Tokyo!
The Japan Olympic Committee never informed the IOC of the fact that all of these beautiful green islands that they presented for approval were in fact built upon nuclear waste. The Summer Olympics means water sports, not just for total immersion, as in the case of the swimmers and divers, but also for every athlete whose water intake is going to be upped. If you're in the marathon or just a 100-meter dash, your water consumption is huge. So how safe is the water in Tokyo? On a flight into Tokyo's Haneda Airport, you can actually see Fukushima because of the huge heat column arising from the destroyed nuclear power plants and the clouds coming over, which are full of radioactive waste. From the edge of Tokyo, Fukushima is less than 200 kilometers away. That's about 120 miles away. And the air currents, the wind currents off from Fukushima and off the sea where the radioactive waste is dumped comes right into Tokyo, plus into its river system. In 5-year studies, researchers from Kindai University found large concentrations of radioactive cesium from Fukushima built up in the floodplain that feeds into the rivers that flow into Tokyo Bay. Right across the Arakawa River is another incineration plant, a smaller run by the Tokyo Electric Power Plant, TEPCO, which runs the Fukushima nuclear plant. And there they dispose of sewage that's been contaminated with radiation. What it indicates is that the rivers of Tokyo are hugely contaminated with radiation from the surrounding area when it was contaminated, and also from the mountains, the sources of these rivers. Are shattered. The whole area is dead. Something killed all the shellfish here. Lake Tama, called Tamako in Japanese, is the main source of water, drinking water, for the Tokyo region. Unfortunately, after the 3/11 disaster, a huge amount of radiation came in the clouds and in the mists and fog from Fukushima area, drifting all around the mountains, and was deposited up in the watershed, this beautiful watershed of this area. And this problem continues of radiation deposition from whenever the rain comes in from the Pacific Ocean, bringing with it Fukushima radiation, sticking to the leaves and trees and bark, and gradually washing down into the reservoir here, which is the drinking water, the water used when you take a shower, when you cook rice, when you make spaghetti, when you wash your face, flush your toilet, do your laundry. All of that radiation settles here in the lake and goes to every home in the Tokyo district. The next segment will go into the many other environmental threats that the Olympics faces in Japan. And these include, of course, typhoons, tsunami, earthquakes, and worst of all, volcanoes. And then we'll be looking at the combined health risks you'll be facing in Japan from, of course, radioactivity, from electromagnetism, and from monosodium glutamate, this deadly triage of pathogens. The worst case scenario in 2020 is not just heart failure, coming down with cancer, and not being able to have children who are healthy. There's actually something even worse than that, which is the long overdue and expected eruption of Mount Fuji, which is an active volcano. Fuji in the past, when it's erupted, has left a 6-meter layer of hot ash and cinders that come raining down from the sky for months afterwards, which will mean every airport and port will be closed, trapping everyone in the Kanto region. So they cannot escape except northward to the Fukushima area, ironically. Now the problem is, at the foot of Mount Fuji, there's a massive nuclear reactor in Shizuoka Prefecture called Hamaoka Nuclear Plant, packed with nuclear materials. If Fuji sends lava down there, basically the entire cities of Yokohama, Tokyo, and everything northward will be uninhabitable probably for centuries to come. Mount Fuji is not the only volcano to worry about, because the baseball games will be held in the stadium inside Fukushima Prefecture, which is right at the foot of Mount Azuma, which is a very active volcano. In fact, the baseball stadium is right on the path of the lava flow as it comes down, And then on the other side of the stadium is a river, so the lava will turn that into a cauldron of steam. Both Mount Fuji and Mount Azuma are long overdue for volcanic eruptions. These are just incredibly insane places to site the Olympic Games. Of the Abukuma River, everything seems peaceful and quiet and so beautifully clean. And yet this river drains off a vast area that was affected by the fallout from the Fukushima meltdowns. And the water, unfortunately, is highly radioactive. This is the most radioactive river in Japan. We've gone over the radioactivity threat in Tokyo Bay, but what about central Tokyo, where the new stadium is being constructed, and also the old National Gymnasium that was used in the '64 Olympics is located? Well, the readings there don't look very good at all. And don't forget, Tokyo is sometimes directly on the path of major typhoons, as happened in the past, that hit Tokyo Bay and the rivers and canals of Tokyo, flooding the whole city. As you can see from this sign. And finally, there's the big one. Tokyo itself is long overdue for a massive earthquake, like the one that destroyed the city in 1923. Hello again. I'm going to go over the health risks of going to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics from the contamination flowing out of Fukushima into the waters and into the air and into your food. To start with, let's take a look at this amazing video from a German TV station.
We've all heard of an all-you-can-eat buffet, but one all-you-can-eat buffet in Bavaria should have an asterisk beside it, after a German triathlete put that term to the test. Athlete Jaroslav Bobrovsky devoured 100 plates of sushi at the Bavarian buffet. But instead of getting a membership to the Clean Plate Club, the restaurant decided to permanently ban him. Bobrovsky spoke with a German newspaper saying he was told, "I'm banned from now on because I'm eating too much." The buffet owner spoke to Bild saying, "I myself am dead after 13 plates, but he always took 5 or 7 plates at a time. So there was a gap on the sushi carousel, and the other guest asked if we skimped out on the fish." And if you're wondering just how much sushi Bobrovsky consumed, according to Eater, who did some rough math, he ate about 18 pounds worth of sushi. In the words of Matthew Broderick from Godzilla, "That's a lot of fish."
Yaroslav, you're a hero for taking sushi off the menu, sparing all the other buffet diners from the threat of radioactive ingestion from fish. Well, Yaroslav, you're probably wondering, what's this guy talking about, radioactive sushi? Well, let me show you photos I took while doing research in front of the San Onofre nuclear plant, where a mother sea lion died of a heart attack because she had eaten too much fish. The whole Pacific is contaminated, and you better be checking where that sushi is coming from. Now, other parts of this mother sea lion's body had relatively low levels, especially her gut, which was completely empty because she had starved to death because she lacked the agility and the speed to hunt fish. Her gut was totally clean. But all of that cesium accumulation of her previous catches had built up in her heart and caused heart failure. Now consider this. A human being is about the same size and weight as a mother sea lion. Now, if you continue eating sushi the way you've been doing, what's going to happen is that heart is going to start to flutter, become irregular, okay? Because cesium replaces potassium in the muscle tissue. And before long, you're going to start getting spastic and uncoordinated and weaker, which means you're not going to be much of an athlete anymore. And this is the danger of any athletes going to the Tokyo Olympics and eating the food there. Since the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombings, a lot of the medical literature about radioactive exposure is very questionable, since it's governments which have an interest in atomic weapons and nuclear bombs which is doing the research, okay? But I'm telling you not from just theory, I'm telling you from experience, all right, of what radioactivity does to you. Take, for example, I was on the tennis courts in the middle of winter with a coat on, and below that a warmer, a very fleece warmer, and then below that a shirt and t-shirt. And despite being there just 4 hours taking radioactive measurements, I got some serious what's called beta burns on this arm. And you can see from these photos, okay? So basically the bleach spots, this is from the radioactivity I ingested in the water eating noodles. We see radioactivity coming out of my blood through the sweat and leaving bleach marks. They're still here. The beta burns, as you see the big red spots, later that afternoon I could feel the pain right into my bone, in fact right down to the marrow. It was severely painful. The really serious problem is the radioactive exposure of the reproductive organs, which will mean very possibly, probably, mutation in children, if that athlete ever has a chance, in fact, to have children. We can see this in the plant world. Normal Asian aster flower, very small, size of a thumbnail, and we can see the gigantism in the mutant flowers, same species, in Fukushima, size of my hand. Okay, there also I saw gladiolus, maybe normally 2.5 feet, a meter tall at the most, double my height. All right, so gigantism is a sign of serious damage to the DNA of these plants. The same can happen to humans, who in some ways are more susceptible than plants. Now, many of the athletes attending the 2020 Olympics are going to be teenagers, for example, in the gymnastics squads. Now, the problem of radioactive exposure, especially if they're there for a couple of weeks during the heats and then the finals, that's going to be long enough for them to seriously suffer damage to their reproductive organs. For young girls, sufficient exposure to gamma rays and beta rays, both externally but also from the ingestion of water and food, are going to suffer the destruction of their ovaries, essentially, and ovarian cancer. Short of that, many of the eggs, in fact, a lifelong supply of eggs in the young female's ovaries, could suffer serious DNA damage. Male reproductive organs are also subject to testicle cancer, and these are terrible things for young people to endure, to have a life where their ability to have children of their own very much threatened. Surgery, of course, terrible thing. The problem is when they do have children, we've seen what kids are like who came out of the Chernobyl disaster. Their mothers were irradiated during the Chernobyl disaster, and we've seen some terrible cases of mutants. I don't think any Olympic athlete wants that. How do we describe even that from the start, soon after the Fukushima disaster, that Tokyo was selected as the host city of these Olympics, which are within a decade of the Fukushima disaster? What is happening is that the finest physical specimens of young people who have not yet had children, okay, from more than 200 countries around the world are going to be gathered in Tokyo, right close to Fukushima, some of them in Fukushima province itself, the baseball players, where they will be massively exposed to radioactivity. It is hard to think of anything more diabolical than to gather the most physically fit young people, thousands of them, from around the world, from 200 nations, and to expose them to radioactivity. This means that the entire human genome, every race, every nation on the world, is going to suffer radioactive damage. That's going to filter down through the generations. This basically is genocide on a global scale. If these Olympics are not called off in time, I think coaches, parents, and athletes themselves have got to take action to boycott these games to prevent this from happening. This is probably the worst crime against humanity ever in history, not just the history of sports. Now, to protect yourself from electromagnetic energy, as in the 5G system, which will be introduced during the Olympics, you might try wearing a tinfoil hat, like this classic conehead hat. If you think that's a little weird, makes you look like an alien, you might try one of these very stylish hipster Panamas, like this. I'm so cool. And if you are really in a hurry, have no time to go shopping for a tinfoil hat, just use one of these pork pie hats. And the great thing about this is you can actually use it to make a pie. There's a bigger trifecta problem from the combination of radioactivity from Fukushima, the electromagnetism from the 5G cellular phone system they're introducing for the Olympics, combined with this third element of MSG, monosodium glutamate. The problem with the two types of radiation affecting your brain, basically heating it up by all the energy bombardment, is that it can trigger what's called a glutamate storm. Basically, the monosodium glutamate enters into your brain synapses and begins to shut them down, destroying the cells of your brain one after the other, leaving you sort of like a emotionless, non-cognitive drone walking down the streets of Tokyo silently, hanging on the train like this. Sort of a roboticized person that you see a lot of, millions of them, inside Tokyo right now. And there's that other culprit involved in sponsoring the Olympics, Dow Chemical, which produces Lorban, a pesticide that's not much different from the sarin that was used against the Tokyo subways in 1995. The threat is still there if anyone buys Lorban and puts it into the subway. And if you recall, Dow also produced the napalm and the Agent Orange that killed and maimed hundreds of thousands of civilians in the Vietnam War, and also many of the Allied soldiers who participated in that conflict.
The Olympics originated in ancient Greece as war games between rival city-states in honor of their pagan idols. Ares, god of war, Zeus, master of the universe, and Hephaestus, creator of military technology. Javelins and the discus were lethal weapons from the battlefield, and the Olympic boxing matches ended with the death of the loser. Thousands of years later, the Olympic Games were revived by the modern colonial powers as a celebration of their brutal conquest and domination of weaker peoples with their arsenal of rifles and now toxic chemicals, electromagnetic weapons, and nuclear warheads.
Today, the fanatic supporters of the Shinzo Abe regime are very much like the ancient Greeks, being polytheists and also militaristic. Their agenda is to prepare for the coming World War, which in Japanese is called Saishu Senso, the final war. And this explains their program of rearmament as a prelude to a world war. The Tokyo Games are very much like the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. Anyone who participates in the coming Tokyo Games is therefore endorsing the coming mass slaughter, which may end in the destruction of humanity and perhaps the end of all life on Earth. So let's now heed the lesson of that huge stockpile of enriched uranium and plutonium at Fukushima, which is irradiating Tokyo. Say no to the coming 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Within a span of 6 months, these fish died, and by the spring of 2016, there was only one left. No cause of death was given, but I think we know why. Tokyo Disneyland is located on the most radioactive part of Tokyo Bay. It's a small world, after all.